Montana Territory, 1878. The snow blanketed the rolling plains surrounding the small settlement of Pine Ridge, transforming the harsh landscape into something almost magical. But for 24-year-old Sophia Whitfield, there was nothing magical about another bitter winter alone. She stood on the porch of her modest cabin, clutching a tattered letter in her trembling hands, the wind whipping her chestnut hair across her tear-stained face. 1 year, she whispered to the empty wilderness. You promised 1 year. 3 winters had come and gone since her husband had left for the goldfields of California, leaving her with promises of fortune and a swift return. Now, as she stared at the letter, his declaration that he had found another woman and would not be coming back, she felt her world crumbling beneath her feet. At 22, Sophia was already a ghost of the hopeful bride who had journeyed west with dreams of building a life. The frontier had taught her one brutal lesson: trust no one but yourself. Depending on others was a luxury the West did not afford women like her. Her gaze drifted to the rolling hills where her small herd of cattle grazed, a herd that would not survive another month without help. The neighboring ranches had offered to buy her out for a pittance, expecting the abandoned wife to flee back east. But the East held nothing for her now. This harsh, unforgiving land was her home, even if it meant facing it alone. I don't need anyone, she told herself, the words turning to vapor in the cold air. The frontier is no place for love, only survival. But even as she spoke the words, she knew her time was running short. Winter was setting in, and a woman alone couldn't manage what lay ahead. She just needed to survive until spring, then she would figure out what came next. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention. A lone rider appeared on the horizon, his silhouette distinct against the vast Montana sky. Sophia quickly wiped her tears and straightened her simple blue calico dress. She would not show weakness to whoever approached. As the rider drew closer, she recognized the straight-backed figure of Henry Tanner, the youngest hand from the neighboring Triple J ranch. At 26, Henry had a reputation as the finest horseman in 3 counties, with a quiet demeanor that set him apart from the rowdier cowhands. "Afternoon, Mrs. Whitfield," he called, tipping his worn Stetson. His face was youthful beneath a light stubble, his eyes the color of summer skies. "Mr. Jenkins sent me to check on you, what with the storm coming in." "That's kind but unnecessary," Sophia replied, her voice sharper than intended. "I'm managing just fine." Henry dismounted with the fluid grace of someone who spent more time in the saddle than on solid ground. His gaze swept over her property, the leaning fence, the hole in the barn roof, the thin cattle. "I heard about the letter," he said gently, not meeting her eyes. "Word travels fast." Sophia felt heat rise in her cheeks, both from shame and anger. "Did you ride all this way to gawk at the abandoned wife, Mr. Tanner?" "No, ma'am," he said, finally looking at her directly. "I came to offer help. That storm's bringing 2 feet of snow by morning, and your cattle won't survive in that south pasture without proper shelter." "I can't pay you," she said, her pride battling with desperation. "Wasn't asking for payment," he nodded toward her property. "I've got daylight left, could start on that fence and help move your herd to the north pasture before dark." Sophia wanted to refuse. Accepting help meant acknowledging weakness, and weakness was dangerous out here. But the reality of her situation was staring her in the face, as surely as this cowboy with his earnest blue eyes. "Why would you help me?" she asked, suspicion edging her voice. Henry's gaze was steady, honest in a way that was rare in the territory. "Because out here, neighbors look after neighbors, nothing more to it than that." Something in his simple declaration broke through her defenses. She nodded once, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "I'll get started on that fence then," he said, leading his horse toward the barn. Sophia watched him go, telling herself this was a one-time necessity, not the beginning of something more. She had learned her lesson about depending on others, especially men with kind eyes and gentle words. The frontier had no place for such foolishness. But as the snow began to fall and she watched Henry methodically repairing her fence in the fading light, she couldn't help but wonder if her belief was about to be tested. The storm came as Henry had predicted, fierce and unforgiving. Through the worst of it, he stayed in her barn, tending to the cattle and reinforcing the structure against the howling wind. Sophia brought him meals, maintaining a careful distance as they spoke of practical matters. the depth of the snow, the condition of the herd, the repairs needed when the weather cleared. On the third day, as the storm finally broke, Sophia found him patching her barn roof, his breath visible in the frigid air. "You should get back to the Triple J," she said, shielding her eyes against the blinding white landscape. "They'll be nading you." Henry hammered another nail into place before answering. "Mr. Jenkins gave me leave to help you get sorted, said it wasn't right, leaving a woman alone to face this." "I don't need charity," she said stiffly. Henry paused in his work, looking down at her with those impossibly honest eyes. "It's not charity, Mrs. Whitfield, it's community. No one survives out here alone." His words stayed with her long after he'd finished the roof and returned to his bunkhouse at the Triple J. The repairs he'd made would hold, but there was still so much to do, work that required a man's strength or two people working together. A week later, Henry returned with a wagon load of supplies. "Mr. Jenkins sent these," he explained as he unloaded sacks of flour and beans, "said to consider it an advance on your spring calves." Sophia recognized the lie for what it was, a way to preserve her dignity while giving her the help she desperately needed. She should have refused, but practicality won out over pride. "Please thank him for me," she said, accepting the fiction. As winter deepened, Henry became a regular presence at her homestead. He never stayed in the house, that would have been improper, but he appeared like clockwork every few days, always with a new repair to make or a task to complete. Sometimes he brought news or supplies from town. Other times he simply worked in companionable silence. Sophia found herself watching the trail on the days he was due to arrive, her heart lifting at the sight of his distinctive silhouette. It was foolish, she knew. He was simply being kind, fulfilling an obligation to a neighbor. Yet she couldn't help but notice the way his face lit up when she brought him coffee, or how his visits grew longer as the weeks passed. One February evening, as they sat on opposite sides of her porch watching the sunset paint the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold, Henry cleared his throat. "I've been thinking, Mrs. Whitfield. Your south field would be good for wheat, better return than running cattle on it, especially with your limited help." Sophia glanced at him. "I don't know the first thing about growing wheat." "My pa was a wheat farmer back in Kansas," Henry said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I could help you get started come spring." The offer hung between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to voice. "That's very generous," she finally said, "but why would you do that?" "You have your position at the Triple J." Henry was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was soft but sure. "Some men are meant to work for others their whole lives. I never saw myself that way." Before she could respond, he stood, setting his empty cup beside her. "Think on it. No need to decide now." As she watched him ride away, Sophia realized something had shifted between them. This was no longer just about surviving the winter. This was about what came after, and that territory was far more frightening than any physical threat the frontier could present. Spring arrived in fits and starts, the land slowly emerging from its white blanket. True to his word, Henry helped Sophia prepare the south field for wheat, teaching her about soil and seed with the patience of a born teacher. They worked side by side, planting during the day and planning in the evenings. "You could build a proper irrigation system here," he said one evening, sketching ideas on a scrap of paper at her kitchen table. "Divert water from the creek. Double your yield next season." "Next season," Sophia echoed, struck by the long-term vision he presented so casually. He looked up, catching her expression. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't presume." "No," she interrupted, "it's not that. It's just, I haven't thought beyond getting through each day for so long." Henry's gaze softened. "Maybe it's time to start." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken possibility. Then a knock at the door broke the spell, and Sophia rose to answer it, her cheeks flushed. Sheriff Dawson stood on her porch, his expression grave. "Evening, Mrs. Whitfield, Mr. Tanner here." Henry appeared at her shoulder. "Something wrong, Sheriff." "Got a telegram from California," Dawson said, holding out an envelope. "Addressed to Mrs. Whitfield but mentions you too, Tanner." Sophia took the envelope with trembling hands, breaking the seal to read the brief message within. Her face drained of color. "What is it?" Henry asked, concern evident in his voice. She handed him the telegram, her voice barely above a whisper. "James is dead, killed in a mining accident." She paused, "and he wants to know why I've taken up with that Tanner boy so quickly." Sheriff Dawson cleared his throat. "Mrs. Rutherford over at the telegraph office has been talking. Said you two have been keeping company all winter." "It's not what you think," Henry began, but Sophia cut him off. "Thank you for delivering this, Sheriff," she said firmly. "Mr. Tanner has been helping me with my farm as a neighborly courtesy, nothing more." After the sheriff left, an uncomfortable silence filled the kitchen. Henry stood awkwardly, hat in hand. "I should go," he said finally. "Yes, that would be best." Sophia didn't look at him. "People are talking and I can't afford to have my reputation questioned, not now." "Sophia." "Mrs. Whitfield," she corrected him, her voice sharp with sudden fear. The telegram had reminded her of a harsh truth. The frontier was quick to judge a woman alone, and quicker still to condemn one who didn't maintain perfect propriety. Henry's face showed hurt before he carefully masked it. "Mrs. Whitfield," he amended, "I never meant to cause you any trouble." "I know," she said, softer now, "but perhaps it's best if you don't come around for a while." He nodded once, placing his hat on his head. "If that's what you want." After he left, Sophia sat alone at her kitchen table, the telegram clutched in her hand. Her husband was dead. She should feel grief, or at least some sense of closure. Instead, all she felt was a hollow emptiness, and the dawning realization that she had just sent away the one person who had shown her genuine kindness since she'd come west. The weeks that followed were the loneliest Sophia had ever experienced. Without Henry's regular visits, the homestead felt eerily quiet. She threw herself into work, tending the newly planted wheat field and caring for her small herd, but the tasks that had once been shared now stretched before her endlessly. The isolation gave her too much time to think. She replayed her last conversation with Henry again and again, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. Her husband had abandoned her long before his death, leaving her to face the brutal frontier alone. Henry had been the one to stay, to build and repair, to offer a vision of a future beyond mere survival. One evening, as she watched storm clouds gathering on the horizon, Sophia made a decision. The next morning, she hitched her wagon and drove into town. The Triple J Ranch was 5 miles outside Pine Ridge, a sprawling operation that employed a dozen men. Sophia's heart pounded as she approached the main house, rehearsing what she would say to Mr. Jenkins. But it was Mrs. Jenkins who greeted her, a knowing look in her kind eyes. "He's not here, dear," the older woman said before Sophia could speak. "I don't know what you mean," Sophia began, but Mrs. Jenkins waved away her pretense. "Henry left 2 weeks ago," she continued. "Bought that old Peterson place northeast of your land, been fixing it up something fierce." Sophia felt her breath catch. Why would he do that? Mrs. Jenkins gave her a look that suggested the answer should be obvious. "That boy's been sweet on you since the first time he saw you in church 3 years ago. Everyone knows it but you." Stunned, Sophia thanked Mrs. Jenkins and drove her wagon toward the Peterson homestead. The old place had been abandoned for years, the previous owners having given up on the difficult land. As she crested the final hill, she saw it in the distance and nearly gasped at the transformation. The cabin had been completely rebuilt, its logs fresh and solid. A new barn stood nearby, the roof gleaming in the sunlight. And in the center of it all, Henry worked bare-chested under the summer sun, hammering at what appeared to be a new corral. He didn't notice her approach, giving Sophia a moment to gather her courage. Finally, she called his name. Henry turned, surprise evident on his face as he quickly reached for his shirt. "Mrs. Whitfield, is everything all right?" "You bought the Peterson place," she said, her voice carrying across the yard. He nodded, pulling his shirt over his head as he walked toward her wagon. "Seemed like the right time to start my own spread." "Why here? This land is half rock." Henry's eyes met hers, steady and sure. "It borders your south field. Thought maybe we could share that irrigation system someday." The implication of his words hung in the air between them. "I was wrong to send you away," Sophia said finally. "I was afraid of what people might think." "And now," he asked quietly, "now I realize that I care more about what I think," she replied, her voice gaining strength. "And I think that you are the only person who has shown me what it means to have someone stay, even when staying is the harder choice. Henry moved closer, standing beside her wagon now. "What are you saying, Sophia?" She took a deep breath. "I'm saying that I miss you. I'm saying that the future you talked about with the wheat fields and the irrigation and the planning for next season, I want that future. And I want it with you." For a moment Henry was absolutely still, his blue eyes searching her face. Then slowly, deliberately, he reached up and offered his hand to help her down from the wagon. As her feet touched the ground, he didn't let go. "I can't offer much yet," he said. "This place needs work. It'll be years before it's profitable." "I don't need much," she replied. "Just someone who stays." His smile then was like the sunrise, gradual but transforming everything it touched. "I'm not going anywhere, Sophia Whitfield, not without you." The months that followed passed in a blur of hard work and quiet joy. Henry continued to build his ranch while helping Sophia with hers. They maintained separate households, propriety demanded it, but spent nearly every day together, planning improvements that would benefit both properties. In town, gossip flared briefly, then died down as the citizens of Pine Ridge found newer topics to discuss. Mrs. Jenkins proved a staunch ally, making a point of visiting Sophia's farm regularly and inviting her to social gatherings where her presence beside Henry seemed natural and appropriate. The wheat crop flourished under their combined care, and when harvest time came, neighbors pitched in to help bring it in, a community effort that left Sophia overwhelmed with gratitude. For the first time since coming west, she felt truly part of something larger than herself. As autumn painted the countryside in gold and crimson, Henry invited Sophia to dinner at his newly completed home. She arrived to find the cabin transformed, with a proper table set with china she recognized from Mrs. Jenkins' collection and the aroma of a feast filling the cozy space. "What's the occasion?" she asked as he took her shawl. Henry looked uncharacteristically nervous. "Thought we should celebrate the harvest," he said, pulling out her chair. The meal was delicious. Henry had clearly had help from Mrs. Jenkins, but Sophia could tell something was on his mind. Finally, as they finished the apple pie, he cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice unusually formal. "Our properties adjoin, makes sense to manage them together." Sophia smiled. "We already do, for the most part." "Not officially," he continued, "and not in a way that protects both our interests." "Henry Tanner, are you proposing a business arrangement?" she asked, amusement coloring her voice. He looked directly at her then, all pretense of formality evaporating. "No, Sophia, I'm proposing marriage." The bluntness of his statement took her breath away. "I love you," he continued, his voice gaining strength. "I think I've loved you since the first time I saw you at church, looking so brave and alone. I know you've been hurt. I know trusting doesn't come easy anymore. But I promise you, I will spend every day proving that some men do stay. Some men build rather than abandon." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. "I've been so afraid," she whispered, "afraid to believe in anyone again, afraid to need someone." "I know," he said gently, reaching across the table to take her hand. "And if you're not ready, I'll wait, but I wanted you to know where I stand." Sophia looked at their joined hands, then up at the home he had built with his own two hands, a home he had positioned to always be within sight of hers. Every beam and board spoke of permanence, of roots sunk deep into difficult soil. "You already showed me where you stand," she said softly. "You showed me every day this past year." His hand tightened on hers. "Is that a yes?" "Yes," she said, the word emerging as both a whisper and a promise. "Yes, I will marry you, Henry Tanner." They were married on the first snow of winter in the small church in Pine Ridge. Mrs. Jenkins had helped Sophia sew a new dress of deep blue wool that matched the color of the groom's eyes. The entire community turned out, filling the church to capacity, a show of support that moved Sophia to tears. After the ceremony, they returned to what had once been the Peterson place but was now the Tanner Ranch. Henry carried her across the threshold of their home, setting her down in the main room where a fire roared welcomingly in the hearth. "I have something to show you," he said, taking her hand and leading her to what she had assumed was a storage room off the main living area. When he opened the door, Sophia gasped. The room had been transformed into a study, with a desk positioned beneath a window that offered a perfect view of her, their wheat field. Bookshelves lined one wall, already half filled with volumes she recognized from her own small collection, now intermingled with agricultural texts and a few treasured novels. "I thought you might want a place of your own," Henry explained, "somewhere to keep the farm accounts and plan for next season." Sophia turned to him, overcome. "You built this for me." "I built all of it for you," he said simply. "This home, this ranch, it was always meant for both of us, even when I wasn't sure you'd ever see me as more than a helpful neighbor." She touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "I see you, Henry Tanner. I see a man who stayed when staying was hard, a man who built when others would have torn down, a man who loved me back to believing." His kiss was tender, a promise sealed between them. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white, the same world that had seemed so cold and unforgiving just 1 year before. But within the walls of the home they now shared, winter had no power. Here they had created something the harsh frontier could not touch, a love built on the foundation of genuine partnership, mutual respect, and the courage to believe in tomorrow. In the years that followed, the Tanner Ranch prospered. The irrigation system Henry had envisioned became reality, transforming both the wheat field and the surrounding pastures. Their cattle herd grew, as did their reputation for fair dealing and quality stock. 2 years after their wedding, Sophia gave birth to a daughter they named Emma, who grew into a spirited child with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination. A son followed 3 years later, little James, who showed his father's gift with horses almost from the time he could walk. The abandoned wife and the young cowboy had built something remarkable together, not just a successful ranch, but a home filled with love and laughter, a place where the harshness of the frontier was tempered by the warmth of family bonds. On their 10th anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Henry took Sophia's hand in his. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. Sophia shook her head, her chestnut hair now threaded with silver. "Not one." "You..." Henry smiled, the same smile that had first begun to melt her frozen heart during that long-ago winter. "Only that I didn't find the courage to speak sooner." Sophia leaned her head against his shoulder, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. The frontier had taught her that survival alone was not enough. It was love, steady, patient, and enduring, that transformed mere existence into a life worth living. "Some things," she said, "are worth waiting for." And as the sun sank below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land they had tamed together, Sophia knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with the man who had stayed when staying was the hardest choice of all.